It's really, really simple. This has actually got to be a really simple build. Well, with one plywood aquarium finished, it's time for me to start another, my Gold Coast Seaway Aquarium, and I think it's going to be the perfect size to replicate if you're thinking about building your very first plywood aquarium. 8 foot by 4 foot, and the height will be 2.5 foot high. I'm going to make sure I keep track of all the expenses along the way so that you can actually get an idea about how much exactly it will cost you. When you're thinking about building a plywood aquarium, sometimes you just have to actually go by what you have available in the way of materials. And the biggest one you've got to consider is the glass. So this is ultra clear 15mm float glass. Actually, they're 2440 millimeters long and 720 millimeters high. I'm going to cut one in half, or have one cut in half, and that'll be for the two ends. So this aquarium is going to have a back wall of ply, a base of ply, and the two short ends and the front is going to be glass. Do I do lots of big diagrams beforehand before building? Well, not really. This is the extent of my diagrams. The timber I'm using for the floor of the actual aquarium is 140 by 45 treated pine. You can obviously build the tank in any size timber you want, but obviously the lighter the timber you go, the more support you're going to need underneath. You can actually screw straight in without clamping, but you do risk the timbers moving a little bit. So these clamps just provide that little bit of extra security. Tap it in nice and flush. So the actual screws I'm using are these 100mm or 4-inch 14 gauge batten screws. So I'm building this tank base and the stand in one piece and upside down. So once I've finished actually construction, I'm going to get some hefty teenagers to give me a hand, and we'll turn the whole structure over. I can then build the framing for the back wall of the aquarium and install the plywood. In terms of the height of the actual base and stand, maintenance is really important. And if you look at this tank here, the height of it, which is around 1.5 meters high, is at my underarm. And that's really important for maintenance and being able to get your arm over into the tank and to clean the glass without the need for a step ladder. So because the glass I'm using for this aquarium is 720 millimeters high, I roughly want to have the height of the base and stand of the aquarium at 800 millimeters to make roughly 1.5 meters high. I'm not actually just going to use 190 by 45 as a leg. What I've actually done is I've come and cut 2 more pieces of timber, and I'm going to have one piece here and another piece here. And what it actually does, it beefs out the actual corner legs. It also plates a positioning for these joining pieces, which will go from corner to corner and corner to corner. That'll make sure the whole thing's nice and straight and square and provide that bit of bracing and support. The other good thing about having these timbers come out and end up flush with the frame itself is it provides a nice, easy place to fix the dressing hardwood plywood that I use to finish the aquariums, just like I've used over behind me on Palau Reef. Now, a little tip for you, lay out the cross piece. Mark the position of the post on the cross piece. So then when I actually raise it up onto here, the actual marks need to align exactly. Now you would have noticed, or you may have noticed, that I didn't use a square when I was, or a level, to get these legs plumb, because all I'm going to do is convince them to be in the position, clamp them off so they sit nicely within these 2 marks, and then screw them off, and that'll dictate that they have to be plumb. The back wall is going to be made up of 70 by 45 mil framing timber, and then of course we're going to have the actual 15 mil plywood coming up the face. That's a total of 85 mil that I didn't want to have take up from the 4 foot of the actual front to back width of the aquarium. I want it to be external to that 4 foot. So that's the reason why I've actually blocked out these areas between the joists, because I can actually install a frame back here. The plywood will come up the frame and there'll still be enough space to pick up that free edge of the plywood that will form the actual floor of the aquarium. So how easy is that? Build the back wall with the joist, or in this case the stud spacings exactly the same as the subflooring, and that way you can just do it on top. You got your actual joist there to act as a guide, and now all I've got to do is take these clamps off and raise the back wall in position here. I've got a technique where I actually rest the glass directly on the flooring itself, the framing itself, the joist, and it's held in place there in a form of a valley by the fact that the actual plywood that forms the base, and in this case the back wall, is set back by the thickness of the glass plus about 3 mil for the silicone. That creates a bit of a lip, and then I'll actually be screwing a faceplate on the outside here to create, or to finish that valley that the glass sits in with the silicone. I'll show you a lot more about that later on, but what it means for me now is that the height of this back wall needs to be the exact same height as the pane of glass itself, which in my case is 720 mil. I notice when I'm screwing this down that the actual base plate wants to move a little bit, and what I found was that the actual back wall was actually coming out of plumb, or out of square in relation to the base of the tank. And obviously when the glass comes in here, the glass is actually going to sit up against the end here, so I want it to be nice and square. So I've just used a little bit of these packers as I'm just screwing down. You can see one there which I just broken off, and that's just to give it a little bit of a tilt the way I need to. Don't go all the way through, just a little bit, and then you'll actually get the actual back wall nice and square in relation to the base of the aquarium. I think it's really important not to get too stressed and too caught up in the minutiae of choosing the type of plywood that you are going to use. For a long time I thought that using marine grade hardwood ply was the most important thing to do. And then I actually thought about it, and I thought, if the actual aquarium leaks, i.e. the epoxy waterproofing sealer that you apply to the timber leaks, then it does not matter what timber you've used underneath that, it's going to rot. And you've got bigger things to worry about than if you chose hardwood ply or pine ply. So from now on, what I use is 17 mil construction pine plywood. The reason being, it's about $100 cheaper per sheet. So I've used 2 sheets in this build. One entire sheet was for the base, and I had the second sheet cut down. Yes, you certainly can put a straight edge on your plywood at home on a couple of sawhorses and run your circular saw along, but you're going to get a much better job if you actually get your hardware store to do that cut for you. It makes it so much easier just to come on home and put the plywood in position like I did just then and have it fit absolutely beautifully. So there's a tip for you. I can't just screw this plywood off now because I want to apply some epoxy to the reverse side of this plywood just to try and minimize any movement or any swelling of that plywood just from humidity in the air. So that brings me to the next video that you're going to have to wait for, which will be all about sealing and waterproofing the plywood using my favorite marine grade epoxy boat coat. So I'll see you next time when we get stuck into sealing the plywood aquarium.